So a question came up on the message board this morning about water chemistry and whether, as a brewer, you would even think about doing it, or whether you really need to do it, any kind of water treatment. That is, a couple of things need to be sort of thought about, one of which is your philosophy as a brewer. When you're starting your own brewery, you have a few decisions to make, and one of the most important ones would be about water chemistry. Do you rely on the quality of the local water to add its own signature and flavors to your beer? Or do you look to recreate the great beer styles of the world, which would require then that you do some kind of water treatment? Generally speaking, water is good for brewing some kind of beer or another. If it's not particularly good for brewing the particular kinds of beer that you're interested in making, then some treatment might be required. Some small modifications to make the beer truly excellent might be worthwhile considering as well. But at the end of the day, you've got to make that decision for yourself. Do I want to go to the effort to change the water chemistry to make minor, slight nuanced changes in the finish and the flavor and some of the characteristics of my beers to make them that small discernible amount finer, or is that too much of an effort, too much of a financial constraint, too much in the way of wasting time, too much of a time drain on you, or is it something that you're willing to do, go the extra effort to do? I think, as I said in the chat, if you have 6 beers in the final rounds of the Great American Beer Festival sitting on a table in front of you as a judge, then it's tiny nuances that are going to make the difference as to who wins the gold, silver and bronze. Those nuances, those differences can come down to a bare perception, a barely perceivable change or influence in a particular type of hop characteristic. The way the malt expresses itself, those can make that difference. I happen to believe that drinkability is enhanced also by water chemistry. Better water, tailored specifically to make those flavors better, enhances the continued enjoyment, pint after pint, of a beer. In America, it's usual, I think, for brewers to produce beers that are designed to be sipped, enjoyed and savoured, paired with food, drunk with a meal. Whereas in Great Britain, there's a history of producing beers designed to be consumed in large quantities over an extended period of time, and therefore drinkability in those beers is going to be quite a big asset. When it comes to treating water, if the water has high levels of minerals and ions, it's rather difficult then to remove them. It's a little easier when you've got very low levels of water and ions to add more. Treatments available to you are reverse osmosis filtration is pretty much the most successful one. Chlorine or charcoal for filtration removes chlorine, which is added as a preservative to the water by the local water authority, but does little to deal with other ions in the water. So deionization columns are expensive and difficult to maintain. Water softeners produce water that has no hardness but a lot of alkalinity, making them useless for brewing. And so you're left really with one or two options, one of which being reverse osmosis filtration, the other being boiling for a period of time, precipitating out the unwanted chemical components of the water, and then perhaps adding back the required ones. The question also came up as to whether a brew pub can probably get away with only doing 2 or 3 styles of beer. And I would say not in this day and age. A microbrewery, absolutely. There's a very successful microbrewery in Vermont that just does one style of beer and just does it on draft. Tremendous market penetration. Their beer's on tap in nearly every retail account in Vermont that does draft beer. And that's been a great successful model, and there have been others in the past that have tried that approach. That's how Widmer began, with one single beer made in one style and in one serving style, in cask or keg only. But if you're a brew pub brewer, then you've really got to offer a range, and that range of beers needs to be diverse as well. You need a yellow beer, red beer, black beer, and a brown beer, probably a wheat beer perhaps. Beers offering hops and beers offering malt accents would be good. They need to look different, so you need to focus on things that change, that influence the colour and the flavour and the fineness of the bitterness and the malt characters as well. And water chemistry can go a long way towards helping. Just because it's hard, just because it's an effort. We're teaching you the science behind what's going on at the moment, and you may be delving into it and struggling to understand it, but at the end of the day it can be simplified greatly. Look at an analysis, find out what is there, and figure out what you're going to need and therefore how much to add. I can tell you now that ideally I like 100 parts per million of calcium hardness and balanced alkalinity, a neutral residual alkalinity if possible. So taking those into consideration, I tend to look for those in water and will add components to the water to achieve that balance if there isn't enough there. Or if in theory, if I'm forced to, will install equipment that will help remove the excess ions to get me to where I need to be. 100 parts per million of calcium gives enough calcium there for the mash reactions, enough for the kettle reactions, and enough left over for the fermentation as well. If you've got 50 parts per million, then you can get away with adding the remaining 50 parts per million in the kettle, so it's there for fermentation. So again, simplify this. It's very easy actually at the end of the day to calculate and to figure out how much of each ion to add to the water to get you to where you think you need to be. But what we're trying to do here is go into it in such a depth that you understand the concepts behind it and the influences that changes that you make to water chemistry are going to have on the beer. At the end of the day, it's about the influence the water has on pH as much as it is about the individual ions and the flavours associated with them. pH is going to get you where you need to be. pH is going to get your mash reactions correct. It's going to get your boiling reactions correct, and it's going to give you a good fermentation that results in a beer that has flavours in balance and subtlety and nuances to them that are enjoyable and will keep the customers happy. I hope this helps.